Hey, welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Burdinsky, and somewhere on that split screen is Republican Town Councilor Craig Fishbein. Craig, welcome back to the Citizen Mike Show.
Hey, Mike, nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to have you. But let's get right to it because we got a lot to talk about tonight. I want to talk to you about ARPA, and anyone who has followed the story knows that Wallingford is way behind other towns. It seems to be stuck, not moving forward at all. Do you see it that way? And if so, how did this happen?
I do see it that way. In certain aspects, we're at loggerheads. I believe part of the problem is the late start. Certainly we knew the money was coming. We've known the money was coming for a long time. A lot of us were like, okay, what are we doing? And there was a delay. We need to look at this. We need to, see before there was any discussion with the council. And then, we need to hire some sort of a consultant. Okay, well, when are we going to get it done? And it appears that a lot of time had passed. And then we finally have the consultant. And now, the consultant isn't always available for meetings. Meetings are going on behind the scenes without the council being involved, which is a whole nother problem in and of itself. But then we have who has the power to do what, and do you have to work harmoniously? So it's like we have a bunch of puzzle pieces, none of them fit together, and that is ARPA presently.
Yeah, I want to give you my take on it and have you comment on it. I think that one reason why we are so dysfunctional now is because right from the beginning, the mayor announced to anyone who would listen that the way Wallingford would go would be to give businesses or small businesses the grant money. And that was done before any consultation with the council, before the public had a chance to weigh in. And from then on, it appeared that everything that happened after that was designed to fit into the mayor's model of distributing ARPA funds. It will go to businesses. Then, as you stated, the council was invited to relax and do nothing because the mayor said, well, we need a consultant. Things are much too complicated. And although now and again, there was some mention of ARPA, that was basically what happened. The council sort of went into retirement waiting for the consultant to be hired. He was on board in December. From December through now, not much has happened. The mayor hasn't taken the initiative. The council really hasn't, the council leadership hasn't driven this forward at all, trying to narrow the issues, get decisions, ferret out information everyone needs, to pound out progress. That hasn't happened. And here we are. And it's, the middle of June with one more meeting to go before the summer break. With your comment on my comment, if you would.
No, I agree. And a certain aspect of this is everybody wants to be Santa Claus. So, the mayor says to businesses, I'm going to give you lots of money. And, big bad council, they may try and prevent it. It's sort of like what goes on with the Chamber of Commerce. A new business comes to town. The only person who gets invited is the mayor because he's the one who writes the check that makes them a member of the Chamber of Commerce. The mayor wants to be Santa Claus and makes these representations and tries to take the credit. And, I think has bogged down the system, and it's almost tantrumatic to a certain extent. I'm sure if the council had turned around and said, yes, mayor, you're right, all this money is going to go to the businesses, we'd probably be writing checks by now.
Yeah. Let me pivot a little bit. Let's assume you have a magic wand. You could do whatever you wanted to do with this ARPA money. You wouldn't need, let's assume, arguendo, you wouldn't need the mayor's recommendation or even votes. Where do you personally want to see this $13 million go?
There's a lot of projects that we can be working on around town. a lot of people talk about online bill pay. That's something that we could set aside money from this to institute so that people can do that for their taxes, electric, water, sewer, those kinds of things. Certainly the community pool, we've apportioned money. For whatever reason, the mayor won't even put the project out to bid. So it's part of that almost, tantrum aspect of this. I think it's incumbent upon us to know what the numbers are, and for him to fail that project by not getting the number and then saying, well, we don't know how much it costs, you got $5 million, so that's more money for businesses. I don't think that's responsible. Tyler Mill, we have the opportunity to have trails, bridges in there, similar to the linear trail. Certainly last night we talked about a skate park and BMX park. That's something that I think would be really good for our town. Our parks, a lot of our parks need a lot of work. That's something that is eventual, right? So it's either the taxpayers pay for it or we take the opportunity now to do something. The Wooding Kaplan parking lot, it's a whole nother problem in and of itself with the period lighting, those kinds of things. There's issues in town hall. I had a woman contact me the other, it's really not even funny. She went to the bathroom in the town hall, and evidently the faucet fell off in her hand and it's all corroded and stuff. And is this really what we need to do? Another sort of meaty thing is connecting the linear trail to the senior center. There's an ability to go from Oak Street to run a bridge to the regular linear trail. I think that would be a really good project here. Direct deposit for pension checks, those kinds of things. A large meaty project, which I know has been discussed, is the Quinnipiac Avenue, Hall Avenue area. The period lighting there, the millions of dollars that was spent is really underappreciated because we have the poles and the overhead lighting, so the wiring. I would be in favor of a project that put all of that stuff underground. I think it would really enhance that lower downtown area of our town. So those are just some of the projects that I really think we should be looking at with some of this money, as other towns have.
Craig, under the current understanding, the status quo, if the mayor doesn't recommend a specific use for the money, the council has no authority to act. The council has no authority to appropriate. So all these ideas, all these good ideas that you have are going absolutely nowhere. And I suppose it's a waste of the councilor's time to make the list unless the mayor is somehow persuaded to recommend one or more of these ideas. How do you get the mayor to recommend something that the mayor doesn't really want to recommend?
It's sort of the $64,000 question. I think it works the other way as well. If the mayor makes a recommendation or a request, it would call for the council to approve that request. I don't believe that the mayor has the unilateral ability to expend the money. The issue of whether or not we do need the executive branch to cooperate here is an unsettled question. I will, the law department has issued a memorandum to that effect. I have brought up language in the charter, which I believe may support a different interpretation. There have been recent discussions about us going out and getting an independent legal opinion on that issue. Similar to the Dog Pound Trust, I believe that at one point was handled differently. And the charter certainly says that the town council shall administer funds like this. ARPA is different. So certainly we have the ability to perhaps challenge that legal opinion. And should that, it's possible that we hold both the purse strings and the checkbook, but absent cooperation, I see continued friction and logjam.
Yeah, so let me comment on your thought there. We may, or you may characterize it as an unsettled question, but certainly town hall does not. They figure it's settled so that you could go and get another opinion, and assuming the opinion says that the council has all the power, which is very debatable, but assuming that's true, you haven't made any progress, because the mayor could say, we have our opinion, you have your opinion, and we're sticking by ours, unless you want to litigate all the way up to Supreme Court or wherever you want to litigate to. And I don't think the town has the appetite for that. You got to kind of play by the mayor's rules. Short answer to that, because we had a lot of other ground to cover. But
I disagree. I mean, I do a lot of litigation. I don't take a case unless I think there's a prospect of winning it. So, should that legal opinion come back, I would certainly analyze it and make my own determination. But certainly if I have belief based upon that we do have that power and the administration is being adverse, I am not adverse to litigation over that issue.
so what about this? I frankly don't see litigation as very practical. But it seems to me that one aspect of this is not controversial, and that's the grants to the nonprofits. Has been a lot of controversy about that. So why not break this up into component parts and let the applications from the nonprofits go out, let the applications come back in, move ahead with that, with any procedural niceties the council can agree to in like 1 or 2 meetings without dragging it out to the fall, to September or October. And the businesses being more controversial, maybe the mayor needs to be told, Mayor, either you meet us halfway and recommend some of the projects that we, the council, have agreed to. Either you do that, or we don't move forward on the business applications. Yes, hold the business applications hostage until the mayor meets you halfway, because that's the only tool you have. The mayor, of course, would hate that, because that preserves your leverage. If you let those business applications go out, your leverage is gone. Tim Ryan of the EDC fills the room with businesses, and they all characterize their millions of dollars of application requests as needs. Whether they are or not will never be known. And then it's up to the council to resist, this call for 30, 40, $20 million, whatever it may be, characterized as need. But maybe the idea is until the mayor meets you halfway, you don't even get to that point. It's a little bit of a hardball, but I frankly think that's where you're at. And I don't think any 9 of you realize that, but I want to raise it with you now. What do you think?
I agree about the business applications. They should be held up. It would, the perfect world is the mayor would come to us with some community projects, and we'd work together, looking at those first. But even the nonprofits are not uncontroversial. For instance, one of the things that's unsettled is what's the maximum amount of a grant that would be available under this program? What oversight would there be post-application approval as to make sure that the stuff happened? Something that I think should have been dealt with at last night's meeting, that wouldn't have called for the consultant to be there, is to talk about, this committee that there's been a lot of talk about, who is going to review these applications and make determinations, make recommendations, make selections. I don't know why that wasn't on last night's agenda, quite frankly.
I can tell you why.
Sure.
No councilor put it on the agenda.
I can tell you that it was my understanding up until the beginning of this week, well, until Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, that ARPA was going to be on the agenda in general, right? we were informed, it was either Wednesday or Thursday of last week. So after the agenda meeting, that apparently ARPA was not going to be on the agenda.
Well,
So,
it kind of makes my point, though. I think maybe there's a lesson to be learned in that. ARPA will be on the agenda or not on the agenda to suit the will of any Cervoni, Tom Laffin, the mayor, and the EDC. And they may put it on and put it off at will unless there's councilors at every meeting putting ARPA on the agenda, hopefully for some specific point to cover. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of council leadership, Cervoni, Laffin, and the mayor. So again, the lesson is if you want it on the agenda, you better put it on yourself because there's no guarantee it'll be on.
But I think the focus of the majority of the council right now, if you look at what we have appropriated money for, it's been for those community projects. So I think that's the thrust of the majority of the council. So the applications are not a priority until we get to the point, so it doesn't call for that committee to approve those community projects, so the committee is part and parcel of the applications. The body itself is adverse to the application process because of what's going on with the community projects.
All right, I don't want to get too bogged down in that. Just two quick things. The council hasn't appropriated anything, of course. They've expressed some a willingness to allot in a certain percentage to proportion a certain percentage, but there's been no appropriation. Can't be until there's a recommendation from the mayor into the current state of things. And the other is it was just a narrow question I had. If somebody wants something on the agenda, you can't rely on Cervoni, Laffin, and the mayor to keep it on the agenda. That councilors have to put it on. That's the only point I was making. I want to pivot away because we're going to run out of time. What we've been talking about more on the Citizen Mike show are the applications for the business grants. They've been hanging out there for a while. They've gone through a couple of iterations. The last iteration was the beginning of May. Do you have any ideas about changes to the applications as it now stands, those business applications?
Oh, certainly. So last night at the meeting, I brought up a situation where, Tim Ryan had submitted to us an email from a local business, saying they were needing these ARPA funds. And then I started to look at that situation, and I learned that particular business had been recently sued for some very serious discriminatory practices, and that a judgment had recently entered approximately $400,000 as a result of those very discriminatory practices. One of the most egregious cases I've ever read, quite frankly.
It was an employment discrimination case, right? Employment?
Yeah, it was racial and gender, employer using the N-word repeatedly, the C word with females, them having mental problems as a result of that, them having to leave their employment. And, the court ultimately gave them their back pay minus their employment benefits, but then penalized the employer. I think the attorney's fees in that case was $185,000 alone. So there's some civil rights, aspects. So, the applications is the last form that I saw would not have ferreted out something like that. So I think that's one area that really needs to be looked at with regard to the applications.
I want you to, I want to interrupt you because I want to follow up on this, but I want to keep your list of possible changes to the application at hand because I want to get back to that. Just a quick review. Tim Ryan sent to the council a letter from this company, and the letter was two sides that purportedly laid out a case as to why this company needed ARPA money. It was sent to the council, is I think the only way to interpret it, as an example of the kind of company that needs immediate attention, that needs immediate help. But it didn't illustrate the point that I think Tim Ryan wanted to make. Instead, it illustrated that a economic development commission or a panel of reviewing judges, to review business applications, a reviewing panel could be filled with such zeal to help businesses that they wouldn't go into this kind of detail, would overlook, the problems that you just cited with this lawsuit. And it would seem then that this zeal and this prejudgment towards businesses would make Tim Ryan or the EDC the kind of people you would not want on a reviewing committee that would judge business applications. That'd be the last person. You would want someone who's more objective, someone who you would devote more scrutiny, more objectivity to it. And the poor judgment, in my view, is to use this company as the poster child to find out that they've been, sued for these egregious employment practices, and there's a subject of an eviction action. There's a judgment against them to vacate the premises in August. So they're not going to be at that location anyway, all of which the company knew or should have known, given the date of their letter, et cetera. So this slipped through the cracks of the EDC, was sent out, to the general population, us, as an example, but it's an example of how not to handle business applications. That's the only point I wanted, but I'm back to you as to other changes you might, want to make to these applications for businesses.
Yeah, it appears, we've talked a lot about forward projects as opposed to, hardship as a result of the pandemic. That's something that it doesn't appear the last iteration of the applications was focused on at all. It appears that what's being asked for in there is very general. Not so much the applications, but the application has to be very detailed, because what I would not want to see is a committee is created and then a business owner who has submitted an application goes to coffee, goes and has a coffee with two of the members of the committee and lobbies them to get their application. And then you've got, some sort of activity going that's not in the application. So the applications presently are not sufficient for someone to review to make these determinations outside of some sort of additional testimony, interview, that kind of stuff.
Would you be in favor of a limit on business grants, a maximum amount? And if so, what would that be? Or a range?
I would be. I know there's been discussion about 25,000. I think 50 is an appropriate maximum. But certainly, I've sat on groups that have operated like this, and you have a pot of money, you get a bunch of applications, and not everybody gets everything they're looking for. So, you take the ones you want to give money to and you cut them down. But, I think 50 as a max is the number I'm comfortable with right now.
Well, given what's been going on and the suggestions for a committee, which would be really dominated by the mayor supporters, which means the EDC supporters, I think they would get every nickel they're asking for. So I know, the statement has been made with the intention to comfort us that, oh, don't worry, set the max, liberally, but because they may not get every dime, but I frankly think they would get every dime. Do you think the business needs to provide income tax on a confidential basis, income tax returns, or other financial data on a confidential basis?
I think they should have to submit, but I don't think it should be on a confidential basis.
Okay.
I think that you have the ability to redact certain, perhaps personal information,
Yeah.
But, you know, we do that all the time with PDFs, right? You know, you take away the social security number, perhaps the EIN, but you know, ultimately the public has to be able to review what we did, and to seal a tax return in this process, I don't think is open and transparent government.
Okay, let's move on to what happened on Tuesday night. And what prompted the big discussion was a flyer that was sent out by the Economic Development Commission to the people it had contact information for. In addition, there were some, I think, going to businesses, you know, handing it out sort of door to door, but they used all their available contacts and media contacts to distribute a flyer. And we're going to put that flyer up on the screen momentarily. But Craig, if you could help me out so I don't have to use as many words, what was the gist of the flyer? What did it say? We'll put that on the screen now.
Yeah, I mean, the first paragraph of the flyer, I think, is factually accurate. It says that money's coming from the town, and the council's looking at this to finalize an application process for businesses and nonprofits to be assessed before allocating the funds. I didn't have a problem with the first paragraph. It's the second paragraph, which is where the document becomes problematic. It says, as reported in the media, you may have read, several members of your town council are attempting to reduce the monies available for businesses and nonprofits by allocating large sums of money to community projects before the business and nonprofit needs are determined. We believe this tactic is misdirected and not aligned with the intention of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. That is lobbying. That is an accusation. That is not appropriate activity by a town body operating under the auspices of good faith and fair dealing.
Well, this is a key point. If Tim Ryan were here, he would say we did nothing wrong. This is entirely appropriate. He was very unapologetic at the council meeting, so I don't think I'm mischaracterizing his words. He said we did nothing wrong. Yet you found some things wrong, and most of the councilors who spoke also found things that were wrong. What is the problem with the EDC, Economic Development Commission, acting as a lobbyist? What's the problem with that?
It's not their role, first of all.
Do you think they see it as their role?
I don't know what they see as their role. I think to a certain extent they're pointed in a direction and they go in that direction. But the fact of the matter is, I don't know that the members of the EDC up until last night knew what's actually going on with ARPA. You know, the fact of the matter is the mayor in his budget diverts money for capital projects from ARPA himself, $585,000. So for them to point the finger at the town council and to say that they're doing something by reducing monies, you know, to be fair and honest, you should be pointing the finger at the mayor as well. And that's not what they did.
I'm going to go back to the first paragraph that you saw nothing wrong with. I do see something wrong with it. I just want to share, you know, my views with you and the viewers. This was an implied criticism of the council's procedures. They were setting themselves up in an adversarial position with how the council, you know, wanted to go at that by saying that the council wanted to have the audacity to not put out these business applications right away. So they accuse the council of how dare the council allocate or even discuss allocating money to various pots like nonprofits, community-wide uses, you know, before the businesses were attended to first. That was the tone of that first paragraph, which I found objectionable. Automatically, but I'll delete the word automatically, but naturally and probably setting an adversarial course with the council. On the second paragraph, I agree with you, as you point out, that I don't think we want the Economic Development Commission to be a lobbying wing and call out the troops when things don't go their way, a point made very poignantly by Christina Tata at the meeting last night. I've got a couple of other points, but your comment before I proceed.
I agree. And, interesting last night, Chairman Cervoni said something about ZBA making a decision and the council, they don't call out the council when, on the data centers. I mean, that's an apples and oranges approach. I mean, they did their own determination and made their own decision. And they never said, well, the council was wrong and they were outside of the border or anything like that. So, I didn't understand that analogy. This flyer is just wrong, inappropriate. Interesting that I didn't get emailed it, and I have business downtown. Yeah. Interesting that WCI didn't partner with them to disseminate this. There's a lot of interesting aspects about the lobbying effort.
So when this flyer characterizes a good faith discussion by the town council as to what alternative uses could this money go for, they're characterizing that as a tactic. That's a loaded word, and it's a very edgy word, which is out of line and unfair, and it puts what the council's been trying to do in a false light. So I have strong objection to that. I think Jason Zandri did too. And then they go on to say, oh, all of that is misdirected and not aligned with the intention of the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. And in this case, they're propagandizing their followers, again, as was pointed out on Tuesday night, because the Economic Development Commission doesn't have a monopoly on the interpretation of the ARPA, of the American Rescue Plan Act. The intention of the Rescue Plan Act is to do a lot of other things other than help businesses. And this flyer doesn't mention those other fair, legitimate, aims and goals of ARPA. It was a one-sided approach, put everything in a false light, and there should have been an apology for it, in my view. And finally, and then we're going to roll some tapes after you get a comment in. They invite people to come to the. They invite small business leaders or owners at another meeting to come and talk about their financial hardship they experienced from the pandemic. And I'm particularly miffed at that because it's disingenuous. Tim Ryan of the EDC knows full well that the town administration stripped out from the application for business grants the requirement of hardship. Let me say that again. At one point in time, to show hardship was a requirement to get a business grant. That was stripped out at the beginning of May. Now it's no longer necessary to get money. It's no longer necessary to show hardship. Yet the EDC and Tim Ryan are still playing that hardship card and bringing people to the microphone to tell their heartfelt tales. I don't doubt the sincerity of these people. What I do not like is they themselves do not understand that a well-heeled business that bounced back, a business that is well capitalized, a business that may have had losses but did not experience hardship, are just as eligible for grant money as the businesses that experienced hardship. And in talking about changes to the business application grants, that requirement of hardship needs to be put back in. There has to be a question 2 or 3 asking the applicants to describe in detail and document their hardship. Otherwise these grant applications shouldn't go out. So yeah, I had a lot of problems with the flyer. Can we roll the tape? Let's roll that first one and then get your comments. So the time you guys spent discussing ARPA might have been 2 to 3 hours. You'd had other business on the agenda too. And so what I tried to do is get a collage of video clips. We put them together. There's going to be 3 video clips. The first, and they're taken in chronological order. And on the first video clip, we featured really the EDC in presenting their case or their defense as to why they put the flyer out. There's a question of whether or not the flyer was wrong. And we also see towards the end of the clip, Jason Zandri being very eloquent, actually, and saying that the flyer had misinformation, and I agree with that, and that the point of it was to rile people up, and I agree with Jason Zandri's assessment there too. Let's roll that clip. 3, 2, 1.
The EDC exists to support businesses and spur economic development in Wallingford, and our intent of the flyer that's in question was to inform businesses of the scheduled meeting to discuss the small business application and invite them to tell their stories so that you could hear firsthand from the businesses themselves. We understand that some of you have had did not like some of the wording in that flyer in question, and we have taken that to point and we've learned from it.
You know, it sounds as if you're trying to find something wrong with the process. And we know each other well enough.
I know.
That we did nothing wrong. What I mentioned earlier, the intent of the flyer is very simply to make the small business community aware of the fact that this item was going to be discussed on the agenda and encourage them to come and take part in the conversation.
Well, it was
We
also
did nothing wrong.
accusatory.
I'm sorry?
It was also accusatory.
It was accurate.
Well, I still don't.
Find something there that you say is factually inaccurate, then please point it out, and if that is the case, I will publicly apologize.
And since we felt that through communications with businesses in the area, they were totally unaware of the ARPA funding. They were totally unaware of the process. I know there's different sources of communication that the town takes. Facebook, I'm not on Facebook. Many of the business owners are not on Facebook, nor are they getting onto Facebook to read what's going on in the community. So a number of the businesses that I spoke to were completely unaware of this, and we're very appreciative of the fact that that this money might be available because they've been tremendously harmed. They have not been reimbursed through the PPP, and they're very worried about the potential upcoming recession, that they may not be able to survive. So our only intent was to get their voice in front of the council so that you see the big picture and the need. How you decide to spend those funds are totally up to you. And we're not arguing or discussing that or challenging that. Again, our only intent was to get you all of the potential information, to get all of the candidates involved, get their voices heard, and then you make whatever decision you think is the most appropriate use of funds.
Because there's misinformation in this flyer. The element that's causing all the problems is the following, because this is an editorialized comment, and it's laced with opinions. As reported in the media, several members of our town council are attempting to reduce the monies available for businesses and nonprofits by allocating large sums of money to community projects before the business and nonprofit needs are determined. We believe this tactic is misdirected and not aligned with the intention of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. Now, it was claimed that the document was accurate and that there was nothing wrong done there. I want to know what tactic I'm being charged with. Very first allocations that this body made was to nonprofits and businesses. An allocation was set aside for $3.25 million for businesses and $3.25 for nonprofits. That is the first action that we took. There's $150 million that was delivered to businesses in this town from the PPP plan. This is $13 million. I'm real bothered by the fact that, you know, we're talking about how we've got this money and we keep shimming it away. When the very first action was said, before we do anything else, let's put 3.25 here for businesses and 3.25 here for nonprofits. That's good faith saying, look, we acknowledge all sides of this. But to get a flyer out there that says several members of the town council are doing something, it implies something nefarious, and it implies we're moving on a tactic that's not allowed or isn't permissible. And it's wrong because it's totally in line with the final ruling, what the act is. The law that was passed allows these funds to be used in this manner. There are towns, and Councilor Fishbein already mentioned it, that aren't putting a dime more towards businesses or nonprofits. They are making it so the distribution of these funds goes to everyone. If a park needs to be updated, repaired, or maintained, we can do it out of the budget and tax everyone, or we do out of these funds and save everyone. That is a full and fair and equal distribution of all of these funds if you really want to get granular about it. My problem with this is it was meant to inflame people. I think that whole paragraph in there was meant to incite, and it was meant to upset, and I think it was an agenda-driven to put pressure on us. And I don't like it. This was meant, in my opinion, with the intent to rile people up.
So Craig, you saw, you heard, any thoughts on that video?
You know, the members of the council are not happy, don't find this to be productive, a good faith action by a town commission.
Yeah. Before we roll the other clip, there's a point I wanted to make when I was preaching a bit about the flyer and the role of the EDC. I'm not sure the EDC members are themselves aware of this. I don't think the council members are aware of this, but there is a statute that allows municipalities to create economic development commissions. And in that statute, the mission of EDCs across the state are laid out. And calling out the troops, riling up their followers and their constituency is not one of the statutory reasons for an EDC. An EDC, there's 3 points. I'm going to cover them quick. They can conduct research into conditions and trends, economic conditions and trends. They can make recommendations to appropriate officials about economic development. That is a communication from the EDC to the mayor, to the council, not riling up the troops. And there's a third one they can coordinate with, like the Chamber of Commerce or other organized groups. That's what their statutory mission is. And in my opinion, they exceeded that and abused their position by acting as a lobbying group. Let's roll that second clip. You're going to see Vinnie Cervoni talking a bit. He's going to mention quite appropriately that the EDC is comprised of volunteers. The question is, does that give them a free pass? Joe Marone is on that clip, and he talks about what may appear to be a coordination to stack the deck against what the council may be trying to do. Vinnie Testa is on that clip and saying he's very bothered by this call to action. That's how he characterized the flyer. And at the end, a very eloquent Christina Tata speaks up about this flyer too. So let's roll that second clip. 3, 2, 1.
What I saw in your flyer was a certain level of zeal. I'm struggling with calling to task volunteers who did something that, in my opinion, and mine is only one, was at worst a little misguided.
I'm also a little disturbed in what I saw as sort of coordination between you, Mr. Ryan, and the local member of the United Way, and sort of trying to spur the discussion in a certain direction. I think it's great to get business owners here to talk about their issues. I'm happy to talk to anyone in town, business owner or otherwise, to talk about their issues. I feel like this is a coordinated tactic, sort of, to try to influence the political process. I'm not naive. I understand this is how politics works. This whole thing kind of doesn't sit right with me, I guess is where I'm coming from.
But I'm going to be honest right now and say I was just very bothered by this letter. I felt it was a call to action based on a very sly misrepresentation. I have never indicated that I do not support relief for businesses and nonprofits, but I've been presented as someone who needs to be straightened out. That's how I feel. An example of the end effect of your letter is the op-ed that appeared in Sunday's Record Journal. I know you didn't write it. I'm going to quote a few lines. This won't be long. Either these councilors have no idea of how many organizations were affected or the depth of the damage that government lockdowns and pandemic restrictions caused, because they have no actual experience as entrepreneurs or nonprofit governance, or they just don't care. They seem hell-bent to protect as much of the funding for pet community projects such that they don't really want to reach out into the community. In other words, my mind is made up, don't confuse me with the facts. Here's another beauty. These stories of suffering and survival need to be heard by those public officials, me, who would rather not know because they see it as conflicting with their political ambitions. That was a good one. Thanks to those Wallingford Town councilors, them, with the values to understand that ARPA was passed to help small businesses to recover, for nonprofits to again have the resources to help those whose lives were devastated in the past 2 years. And it goes on. Now, I know those are not your words. We all know whose words they are. But they're predictable byproducts of your words. So many small business owners who do not follow our every move here can be expected to feel the same way. That's not acting in good faith. I still respect all of you. I expect to work productively with you going forward because, frankly, our mission is too important for things to go any other way. But I wanted to share my displeasure. I was disappointed. Honestly, when I read it, I thought it was a cheap shot.
I, too, was quite upset by the flyer. So I was disappointed by it also. I did think it sounded accusatory, and I think it was misleading. And it's unfortunate that the perception in the public is that we are doing something wrong when what we're trying to do is just figure out how to use this money. But I think even some of the EDC members don't know or aren't aware of what has been going on with this ARPA process. And so I want to maybe clear some of that up or maybe try to help understand why this was upsetting to some of us. I kind of feel that through the whole ARPA process, there was a strategy from the administration from day one as to how this money should be spent. And it was decided before the council could even have any say. And again, this isn't easy because this is nothing that I wanted to come out in public, but now that this flyer's come out and we're being made to look like the bad ones, I feel that I have no choice but to let this come out. Back in February 16th, 2022, I had emailed our consultant, and I had asked him, I was just looking for the breakdown of the time that he has spent with anybody for ARPA. And he wrote back to me, this is in February, it's basically been me with 3 meetings with the mayor, Janice, Tim, and 1 or 2 other staff to discuss the application process. I also did a bit of research on my own to see what other localities were doing for applicants that were more backward looking. So far, this has been a very mayoral-driven process with staff responding to his direction. I wrote back and said, thank you very much, I appreciate it. And then he emailed me again and said, and by backward looking, I mean to replenish for economic hardship that has already occurred. The mayor was adamant that this was his top priority. That is versus an applicant that would be using the money for investment in the future. Candidly, there was little discussion of this. I tried to bring it up, but it was not considered to be a priority. That was before many of the council conversations. Then I see in the EDC minutes, this is June 6th, under ARPA update, Staff Ryan stated that he met with the mayor and Janice Small, Town Corporation Council, to discuss the small business and nonprofit applications. And then later on in that same paragraph, the commission agrees that the application should go out to the community to determine the need for small businesses and nonprofits prior to committing funds for community projects. It is the commission's hope that the council chambers will reflect the support of businesses and nonprofits. There were emails from the EDC to select nonprofits, not all. I know of a food pantry in town that serves 40 families a week. They know nothing about this. My concern with the flyer was who it was distributed to, what was that list? Because I'm sure it didn't go to every single business, despite, you know, maybe your best efforts. It doesn't go to every business, and there's businesses that aren't aware of this. So I hope you can see my concern that I think this whole process has been skewed by people that are on, not skewed by, but the people that are in the know about ARPA are people that are in the inside loop. It's been agenda-driven. It was decided before we were even allowed to discuss it where the money would go. And there's been, I would call it a smear campaign of the council through things like this flyer and through the communication that the purpose of ARPA is for businesses. And it's not. That's blatantly not true. And yet, every ARPA meeting, we have, you know, EDC members or people coming to the microphone and saying, this is the intent, this is the purpose, and the council is not using this for its purpose. And it's not. That's not the purpose of it. You can use it for that. You can also use it for parks. And yet the Parks and Rec Commission didn't write a flyer like this and send it out and say, why don't you go complain because your town councilors aren't using the money the way it's intended? They didn't say that. They could have. They would be in the same boat. The PUC, you know, Public Utilities Commission didn't write a thing and say, oh, the town council is misusing your money because they didn't spend it all on sewers, but they could have because that's an allowable use. Again, I do feel bad about this. I'm sorry if because I have a lot of respect for all of you, and I'm upset by it because I think it is out of character, and but I don't know at this point. I mean, I'm not, this whole process has been so tainted. I'm not really sure where we go from here.
Okay, Craig, you heard it, you saw it, you were there. Your thoughts on that video?
You know, you mentioned eloquent speaking before with regard to Vinny Testa. You also mentioned with regard to Christina Tata, and I agree. But I got to tell you, Vinny Testa was very eloquent. There were some phrases that he came up with, and I sat there and I said, you know, that was pretty eloquent.
We got a third clip. It's a lot shorter. This wraps up the discussion, really. 3, 2, 1, go.
But I do have to say, I think that this letter has caused additional frustration. I think some of the wording was unwise and could have been said better. But I agree with Councilor Testa that I think it's just time for all of us to move on and move forward and figure out how we spend these ARPA funds to benefit our small businesses, our nonprofits, and to do community projects here in town. I do think this letter was a mistake, but I think you're doing the right things for Wallingford, and I look forward to working with you and trying to finalize once and for all how to spend these ARPA funds. So thank you.
You know, another concern, you know, I think Councilor Testa brought this up, is the op-ed on Sunday, because, you know, I think it was learned in the last year or so that the author of this op-ed also writes for the chairman of the EDC. The timing of the op-ed in conjunction with the flyer looks like it's a coordination.
So Craig Fishbein, you saw that third clip. You were there. You heard it. You saw it. You spoke. What do you think?
You know, we know that we learned within the last year or so that Mr. Knight evidently ghostwrites for Mr. Mira, his column. You know, the column appeared to be boosting up the flyer and the need for the flyer. It totally seemed coordinated. You know, that was my takeaway, and there were some very damning statements in the op-ed that I think get imputed upon the EDC as part of boostering their offensive flyer. The other thing is there was a statement that our businesses are not on Facebook. Now, I just, you know, coming from someone who isn't on Facebook, that the individual said they're not on Facebook and that our businesses are not on Facebook. You know, I got, what is it? The Wallingford, positively Wallingford has 20,000 members. You can't tell me that business owners aren't on Facebook, as well as the businesses. I don't know where that comes from. So
Just thinking about, are we going to go through the summer now with nothing happening? What's your prediction? And then we'll sign off.
I think it's going to be like it usually is on the council, where there's delay, and then there's going to be no time left. And it's going to be like, you know, you got to spend this money. The only place that we've identified is here. Otherwise, you're going to lose the money, you know, pull the trigger. I mean, how many times do we run into that? That's what my crystal ball shows.
Let's make that the final word. Craig Fishbein, thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show. And viewers, thanks for watching. We do appreciate it. We want to give a shout out to WPAA TV. It broadcasts the Citizen Mike Show weeknights at 9. We used to say, hey, if it's 9 at night, it's Citizen Mike. Thanks again, Craig, and thanks everyone. We'll see you next time.